Hey guys, welcome back to the Readers. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is an entitled people's story. I've always been particular about my living situation. After watching my parents battle with an overbearing homeowners association for years, I swore I'd never put myself through that special kind of suburban hell. Their constant fines for leaving the garbage can out an hour too long or having grass half an inch too tall seemed like legalized extortion. So when I started house hunting 3 years ago, my realtor thought I was obsessed. I kept asking about HOA boundaries, requesting property maps, and checking county records. But my persistence paid off when we found my current home, a beautiful colonial-style house on 2 acres that sits in a unique position. My property runs alongside an upscale planned community with an infamously strict HOA, but crucially, my land isn't part of their jurisdiction. The previous owner was a retired civil engineer who had originally owned a larger parcel. When the development was built, he sold most of his land but retained this slice, designing it with a private access road that runs parallel to the HOA main entrance for about a quarter mile before branching off to my house. He had the foresight to establish permanent easements and file all the proper documentation with the county. "You've hit the jackpot," my realtor told me. "All the benefits of living near a manicured community without any of the restrictions." And she was right. I moved in and made the place my own. I parked my restored vintage truck in the driveway, something explicitly forbidden by the neighboring HOA bylaws. I painted my front door a vibrant teal. I installed solar panels on my south-facing roof without needing approval from anyone. I even put up a basketball hoop for my nephews when they visit. While I keep my property well maintained, I enjoy my freedom. For the first 2 years, everything was peaceful. I'd wave to neighbors from the adjacent community during my morning runs, and occasionally chat with them at the local coffee shop. Some even expressed envy at my freedom from the HOA restrictions. Then came the regime change. The signs appeared innocent enough at first. Campaign yard signs popping up in the neighborhood announcing, "Vote for a cleaner, safer community." The new candidates promised stricter enforcement of standards and no more exceptions. I didn't pay much attention since it didn't affect me, but I should have recognized the warning signs. The first incident happened on a Tuesday morning. I was working from home when I noticed a man and woman in matching navy polo shirts with some kind of embroidered logo walking slowly up my private road. They carried clipboards and were stopping occasionally to take photos and make notes. My security cameras caught them pointing at my vintage truck and shaking their heads disapprovingly. I stepped outside just as they were placing something under my windshield wiper. "Excuse me," I called out. "Can I help you with something?" They turned, seemingly surprised to see me. "Good morning, sir," the woman said with a practiced smile. "We're conducting routine inspections for the community. Your vehicle here is in violation of Section 8.3 of the bylaws. No recreational or non-standard vehicles visible from the street." I blinked in confusion. "I think there's been a misunderstanding. My property isn't part of your HOA." The man chuckled condescendingly. "Sir, all homes in this area are part of the association. Your predecessor signed the covenant when this development was established." "No, actually he didn't," I replied, keeping my tone polite but firm. "This property was never incorporated into the development. My driveway is a private road." They exchanged glances that clearly communicated they thought I was trying to pull a fast one. "We've heard that before," the woman said, her smile tightening. "Nevertheless, we'll leave this courtesy notice. You have 7 days to move the vehicle to the garage or face a $150 fine." They walked away before I could respond further. I removed the notice, a yellow slip warning of my violation, and shook my head. I decided to ignore it, assuming they'd check their records and realize their mistake. I was wrong. 3 days later, I found another notice, this time about my basketball hoop being an unauthorized recreational structure. The day after that, I received an official-looking letter stating I was in violation of 4 separate bylaws, including unapproved exterior color choices, my teal door, and non-conforming energy equipment, my solar panels. That weekend, I was in my yard gardening when I noticed the same pair, plus an older man in a golf shirt, standing at the edge of my property taking photos of my house. "Excuse me," I called out, walking over. "I need to clarify something. This property is not part of your HOA jurisdiction." The older man stepped forward, extending his hand. "I'm the new president of the board, and I'm afraid you're mistaken. All properties within the community perimeter must adhere to our standards." "I have the documentation proving otherwise," I replied, declining to shake his hand. "And you're currently trespassing on a private road." His face reddened slightly. "This is community access, No, it's my driveway. If you check the county records, you'll see this is private property with a recorded easement. Look, he said, dropping all pretense of friendliness, the previous owner may have told you some story about being exempt, but that's not how this works. Everyone needs to follow the rules. I'd be happy to show you the documentation, I offered. Submit it with your variance request forms, he said dismissively. In the meantime, you have several violations that need immediate attention. I realized reasoning with them was pointless. The next day, I contacted a real estate attorney who specialized in HOA disputes. This happens more often than you'd think, my attorney said after reviewing my documents. HOA frequently overreach their boundaries, sometimes deliberately. Your paperwork is in perfect order. They have absolutely no jurisdiction over your property, and yes, they're trespassing when they enter your private road without permission. Armed with this confirmation, I requested a meeting with the HOA board. I brought copies of my property deed, the recorded easements, survey maps, and the original documentation from when the development was established, clearly showing my property's exclusion. 5 board members sat across from me in the community center meeting room, looking thoroughly unimpressed. As you can see, I explained, pointing to the maps, my property was specifically excluded from the development. This road is privately owned and maintained by me. The president leaned back in his chair. The previous owners followed our guidelines as a courtesy. We expect the same neighborly cooperation from you. I maintain my property to my standards, I replied, but I'm not subject to your rules. Everyone says that at first, one woman remarked with a dismissive wave, but we all have to do our part for property values. My property isn't devaluing anything, I said, feeling my patience wearing thin. And courtesy works both ways. Having your patrols trespass on my property isn't neighborly. We'll need to review these documents with our attorney, the president finally said, clearly unhappy with the direction of the conversation. But in the meantime, those violations need to be addressed. There are no violations because I'm not part of your HOA, I stated firmly. And please inform your patrols that they are not authorized to enter my private road. As I left, I heard one of them mutter, "We'll see about that." The following week, things escalated dramatically. I received an official warning letter claiming I owed $750 in accumulated fines. Then I discovered HOA violation stickers, the kind designed to be difficult to remove, placed on my mailbox and front door. The final straw came when I returned home to find 3 board members gathered around my vintage truck, one of them photographing what appeared to be a boot they were preparing to place on my wheel. I pulled up behind them, blocking their exit, and confronted them. "What do you think you're doing to my vehicle?" I demanded. "Enforcing the bylaws," the president said smugly. "Continued non-compliance results in vehicle immobilization." I pulled out my phone and started recording. "You are currently trespassing on private property and attempting to vandalize my vehicle. I've provided documentation proving you have no jurisdiction here. Leave immediately, or I'm calling the police to report you." "You can't record us without permission," one woman protested. "I can on my own property when you're trespassing," I replied. "Now please leave." "This isn't over," the president warned as they reluctantly walked away. I knew it was time to take serious action. Over the next 2 weeks, I implemented a comprehensive plan. First, I installed additional security cameras covering every inch of my property and driveway with cloud backup of all footage. Next, I had large private property, no trespassing signs professionally made and installed at the entrance to my driveway and at intervals along its length. Each sign included the relevant legal statute numbers. I had my attorney send a formal cease and desist letter to each board member, the HOA management company, and their insurance provider, detailing their harassment and trespassing with copies of all documentation proving my property's status. Finally, I visited the local police department with my attorney to file a report about the ongoing harassment and trespassing issues. The officer who took my report seemed familiar with HOA overreach problems. "We've had issues with this particular board before," he confided. "If they continue after your formal notice, call us immediately." For a few days, all was quiet. Then my security cameras caught 3 board members removing one of my no trespassing signs. I had expected something like this, which is why I had installed the cameras. I immediately called the police. When the officers arrived, I showed them the footage of the sign removal and provided copies of my property documentation and the cease and desist letter. The board members were still on my property, apparently taking photographs of other violations when the police confronted them. I stayed back but could hear their conversation clearly. "This is community property," the president insisted. "He's trying to avoid following the rules that everyone else follows." "Sir, we've verified the property records," the officer replied. This is a private road on private property, not subject to your HOA covenants. You were served with legal notice to stay off this property." "We're just trying to maintain standards," one woman argued. "He's destroying property values with that eyesore of a truck and ridiculous door color." The officer was unmoved. "Ma'am, you're currently trespassing, and we have video evidence of you removing legally posted signs. The property owner wishes to press charges." The looks on their faces were priceless. They went from indignant to panicked in seconds. 3 days later, I received a call from someone identifying themselves as the regional director of the management company that ran the HOA. "We've reviewed your documentation and consulted with our legal team," she said, her tone all business. "You're correct that your property is outside the HOA jurisdiction. We're implementing immediate corrective actions, including board member education." "That's a start," I replied, "but it doesn't address the harassment I've endured or the attempted vandalism of my property." "The board members involved have been removed from their positions," she assured me. "We're also preparing a formal written apology and would like to discuss appropriate compensation for your troubles." As it turned out, the management company was terrified of the potential liability. Not only had the board members trespassed and removed my signs, but attempting to boot my vehicle could be considered attempted conversion or vandalism. Their insurance company was equally concerned about potential claims. 2 weeks later, I received a detailed written apology from the management company, along with a settlement agreement providing compensation for my legal fees and acknowledging that my property was not subject to their jurisdiction. 3 board members, including the president, were removed from their positions. The local newspaper even ran a small article about the HOA overreach incident, without naming names but making the situation clear enough that my neighbors knew exactly what had happened. The most satisfying development came from my immediate neighbors within the HOA. Several of them quietly reached out to thank me for standing up to the board. One older couple even confided that they had been afraid to put up holiday decorations because of aggressive enforcement. With the troublemakers gone, the community began to feel less restricted. As for me, I celebrated my victory by installing a beautiful koi pond in my front yard, something expressly forbidden by the HOA guidelines. It's tasteful, well-maintained, and completely legal on my property. I even added a small bench beside it where I sometimes sit in the evenings, waving pleasantly to passing neighbors. The new HOA board members give my property a wide berth when they pass by, and my teal front door has never looked better in the afternoon sunlight, right next to the new brass plaque that reads, "Private property, all rights reserved." Sometimes standing your ground isn't just about winning, it's about protecting what's rightfully yours. And in this case, that included the right to park my vintage truck wherever I damn well please. The first one is an entitled people story. For context, I've been working at Marshall Tech for almost 5 years now. It's a mid-sized IT consulting firm with about 150 employees. When I first started, it was actually a great place to work. The atmosphere was positive, management was supportive, and I was climbing the ladder at a decent pace. I went from junior developer to team lead in just under 3 years, which was pretty much unheard of at our company. Everything changed when our original CEO retired and the board brought in Darren to replace him. Darren was one of those MBA types who talked about synergy and optimization while knowing basically nothing about our actual business. Within 6 months, he'd fired 3 of our most experienced developers and brought in his buddies from his previous company. The writing was on the wall. He was cleaning house to make room for his people. Despite all this, I kept my head down and focused on my work. My team consistently delivered projects on time and under budget, which made us valuable enough to avoid the first few rounds of layoffs. I knew I was walking on thin ice, though. Darren had this way of looking at me during meetings like I was a problem he needed to solve. Things took a turn about 6 months ago when a new manager named Vince joined the company. He was clearly one of Darren's cronies. They played golf together on weekends and had the same smug attitude about everything. From day one, Vince made it clear he didn't like me. He'd question my decisions in front of my team, assign impossible deadlines, and nitpick every minor detail in my reports. "I don't think your team is operating at maximum efficiency," he told me during one of our one-on-one meetings. "I've been reviewing your numbers and I think we could squeeze at least 20% more productivity out of your developers." "That's not realistic," I replied. "My team is already working overtime to meet the current deadlines. Pushing them harder will just lead to burnout and mistakes." Vince leaned back in his chair with a smirk. "Well, that sounds like a management problem, doesn't it? Maybe you're not cut out for leadership." That conversation played on repeat in my head for days. I knew what was happening. They were building a case to fire me, but I loved my job and my team, so I wasn't going down without a fight. I started documenting everything, every unreasonable request, every last-minute deadline change, every success my team achieved despite the obstacles. I figured if they were going to try to fire me for performance reasons, I'd have evidence to the contrary. What I didn't anticipate was that they'd go in a completely different direction. It was a regular Tuesday morning when I got called into the main conference room. When I walked in, Darren, Vince, and someone from HR I'd never met before were sitting at the table, their faces serious. "Please have a seat," Darren said, gesturing to the chair across from them. The atmosphere in the room was thick with tension. "We've called you in today because a serious issue has come to our attention," the HR person said. Her name tag read, Laura. "We have evidence that suggests you've been stealing company equipment." My jaw literally dropped. "What? That's ridiculous." Vince slid a folder across the table. "We have inventory records showing that 3 high-end laptops and 2 development tablets were signed out to your team but never returned. The market value of these items is approximately $10,000. I flipped through the documents, my heart racing. This is the first I'm hearing about any missing equipment. My team checks out devices for testing all the time, but we always return them to IT when we're done. "The records say otherwise," Darren interjected. "The last person to sign for these devices was you." My mind was spinning. I definitely hadn't stolen anything, and I couldn't believe they were actually accusing me of theft. This wasn't just about getting rid of me anymore. They were trying to destroy my reputation and possibly even pursue criminal charges. "This is absurd," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I want to see the actual sign-out records, not just this summary report." "Those records are confidential," Vince replied smoothly. "But we have all the evidence we need. We're prepared to involve the police, but we're giving you the opportunity to resign quietly first. If you do, we won't press charges." It was such an obvious setup that I almost laughed. Almost. The severity of the situation hit me hard. They weren't just trying to fire me, they were threatening me with legal action for something I didn't do. "I'm not resigning," I stated firmly. "And I definitely didn't steal anything. I want time to review these allegations properly and gather my own evidence." Darren sighed dramatically. "We're placing you on administrative leave effective immediately while we conduct a full investigation. Please hand over your key card and laptop before you leave the building. You'll be escorted out by security." The humiliation of being walked out of the office by a security guard was almost unbearable. My team watched with confused expressions as I was led to the elevator. I couldn't even explain what was happening. I was too shocked and angry to form coherent sentences. My wife was understandably concerned when I came home in the middle of the day. When I explained the situation, she was furious. "They can't just make up lies about you like that," she exclaimed. "You need to get a lawyer right away." She was right, of course. I called a friend who worked in employment law, and he recommended a colleague who specialized in wrongful termination cases. I had a consultation scheduled for the next morning, but I couldn't just sit around waiting. I knew I was being set up, and I needed to figure out how and why. So I started reaching out to colleagues I trusted. My first call was to Jake, our IT support specialist who handled all the equipment checkouts. Jake and I had always had a good relationship, and I hoped he might be willing to share some information. "Hey, this is awkward, but I've been accused of stealing some equipment, and I know I didn't do it," I explained when he picked up. "Do you have access to the sign-out records?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "Yeah, I saw the flag on your account this morning," Jake replied. "It's weird, man. Those devices were marked as checked out to you, but I don't remember you ever coming to get them." That caught my attention. "Wait, so there's no actual signature? Just an electronic record?" "Yeah, exactly. Normally I'd get a signature on the tablet when someone picks something up, but these were just entered into the system." "Who has access to make those entries without a signature?" I asked. Jake hesitated. "Well, me, my supervisor, and all the senior managers, including Vince. He's been coming in a lot lately asking about inventory and accessing the system." Now we were getting somewhere. "Jake, do you think you could—" "I can't send you the records," he interrupted. "They're monitoring everything now and I could lose my job, but check your personal email in an hour." True to his word, an hour later I had a spreadsheet showing all equipment checkouts for the past 6 months. The 5 items supposedly taken by me had been entered into the system manually by someone with manager-level access. No signature, no camera footage of me picking them up, nothing. The entries had been made on days when I was either in client meetings off-site or, in one case, on vacation. This was my first real piece of evidence, but it wasn't enough to prove I was being framed, only that I hadn't actually signed for the equipment. I needed more. My next call was to Maria, one of the developers on my team who I knew was absolutely loyal. "I'm so sorry about what happened," she said when she answered. "Everyone's talking about it, but none of us believe you would steal anything." "Thanks, Maria. I'm trying to figure out what's really going on. Have you noticed anything weird lately? Anyone asking about equipment or going through our team's storage area?" "Actually, yes," she replied, lowering her voice. "Last week, Vince came by after hours when most people had left. He was looking through the cabinets in our area. When I asked if he needed help, he said he was just conducting a routine inventory." "Did he take anything?" I asked. "I don't know. I had to leave for my daughter's recital, but he was still there when I left." This was starting to paint a clearer picture. Vince was likely the one who had set me up, probably on Darren's orders. But proving it would be another matter entirely. The meeting with the lawyer the next day was both reassuring and sobering. "They've executed this pretty cleverly," said Rachel, the attorney. "Without direct evidence that they falsified the records, it's going to be tough to prove you didn't take the equipment. But the fact that there are no signatures and the entries were made when you weren't even in the office helps your case." "So what do I do?" I asked. "First, we send a formal letter stating that you deny all allegations and requesting all evidence they have against you. That includes camera footage from the days the equipment was supposedly checked out. We'll also demand they preserve all electronic records related to the inventory system. They might try to delete things if they know we're onto them." Rachel drafted the letter that afternoon, and I felt slightly better knowing that formal action was being taken. But I knew I needed a smoking gun if I wanted to truly clear my name. That's when I remembered something important: our office security system. Every door required a key card to enter, and all access was logged. If I could get those logs, I could prove I wasn't in the building when some of the equipment was supposedly checked out to me. I called another trusted colleague, Priya, who worked in building operations. She was hesitant at first, but after I explained the situation, she agreed to help. "I can't directly access the security logs," she explained, "but I know someone in security who might be willing to take a look. Give me a couple of days." Those 2 days were agonizing. I couldn't stop thinking about how quickly my career and reputation could be destroyed by these false accusations. My wife tried to keep my spirits up, but I could tell she was worried too. Finally, Priya called back. "My contact came through. I have the access logs for the past 6 months, and guess what? On 2 of the dates when equipment was supposedly checked out to you, your key card shows no activity at all. You weren't in the building." "That's huge!" I exclaimed. "Does it show who was accessing the IT storage room on those days?" "Yes," she replied. "Vince used his card to enter the IT storage area on both days, about an hour before the system shows the devices were checked out to you." This was exactly what I needed, proof that Vince had opportunity and access. But I still didn't have definitive evidence that he was the one who falsified the records. For that, I needed something more. I spent the next day thinking through every angle. If Vince was framing me, he must have had a reason beyond just wanting to get rid of me. And then it hit me. The missing equipment. If he had actually taken the devices, they had to be somewhere. I called Jake again. "Hey, quick question. Do our company devices have any kind of tracking software on them?" "Yeah, all the high-end stuff has Find My enabled for security purposes. We can remotely locate them if they're connected to the internet." "And who has access to that tracking system?" "Just me and my supervisor. It's separate from the regular inventory system." I took a deep breath. "Jake, I know I'm asking a lot, but could you check the locations of those supposedly missing devices? It could clear my name." There was a long pause. "That's definitely against protocol," he finally said. "But so is falsifying inventory records to frame someone. Send me the serial numbers from that spreadsheet." An hour later, Jake called back, his voice excited. "Dude, I found them! 3 of the devices are currently active and showing a location. They're at a residential address in Westlake." "Whose address is that?" I asked, though I already had a suspicion. "I don't know, but I can tell you it's not your address. I checked that first." I quickly looked up the address on Google Maps and then cross-referenced it with the company directory. It matched Vince's home address. "Holy shit," I whispered. "He actually took them." Now I had what I needed, concrete proof that the allegedly stolen equipment was in Vince's possession. I immediately called Rachel to update her. "This is exactly what we needed," she said after I explained. "I'm going to amend our response letter to include this information and formally request an investigation into Vince's activities. I'll also suggest that if they don't withdraw their accusations against you immediately, we'll go to the police ourselves with evidence of the actual theft." The effects were almost immediate. The next day, I received a call from Laura in HR. "We've received some concerning new information regarding the missing equipment," she said, her voice carefully neutral. We're placing the investigation on hold while we look into these developments. In the meantime, your administrative leave will continue with pay." "That's not good enough," I replied firmly. "I want a full retraction of the allegations against me and an apology. Otherwise, my lawyer will be contacting the police about the actual location of the stolen devices." There was a pause. "I'll have to discuss this with leadership. Someone will get back to you." 2 days later, I received an email from Darren himself. "After further investigation, we have determined that there was an unfortunate error in our inventory tracking system. The equipment previously reported missing has been located, and we no longer believe you had any involvement in its disappearance. We apologize for the misunderstanding and invite you to return to work on Monday." No real admission of wrongdoing, no explanation of how the error occurred, and definitely no mention of Vince's involvement. I forwarded the email to Rachel. "This is a start, but nowhere near adequate," she replied. "They're trying to sweep this under the rug. We should push for a full acknowledgement of what happened and compensation for the damage to your reputation." She drafted a response demanding a complete explanation of the error, disciplinary action against those responsible, a formal written apology, and compensation for the emotional distress caused by the false accusations. We also requested a meeting with the board of directors to discuss the company's culture and leadership. I think they realized at that point that I wasn't going to go away quietly. Within hours, I received a call from someone I'd never spoken to before, Elaine Harrison, the chair of the board. "I've been briefed on your situation," she said, her tone serious. "I want to assure you that the board takes these matters very seriously. We're conducting our own independent investigation into what happened. In the meantime, we'd like to offer you a settlement package to resolve this matter amicably." The settlement they offered was substantial: 6 months' salary, a clean employment record, and a positive reference for future jobs. But it also required me to sign an NDA and waive any right to take legal action against the company or its employees. I discussed it with my wife and Rachel. We all agreed. I wasn't interested in burning bridges if I didn't have to, but I also wasn't going to let Darren and Vince get away with what they'd done. "I'm willing to consider a settlement," I told Elaine when I called her back. "But I have conditions. First, I want transparency about what actually happened and who was responsible. Second, I want assurance that appropriate action will be taken against those individuals. And third, I want to be reinstated in my position with a promotion and a raise to compensate for the damage to my reputation." There was a pause on the other end of the line. "That's a tall order," Elaine finally said, "but let me see what I can do." 3 days later, I was invited to a meeting with Elaine and 2 other board members. They explained that their investigation had revealed that Vince had indeed taken the equipment for a side project he was working on, likely selling it for profit, and then falsified the records to make it look like I had taken it. Darren had been aware of the plan and had approved it as a way to force me out of the company without having to pay severance. "We want you to know that both Vince and Darren have been terminated effective immediately," Elaine told me. "Their actions were completely unacceptable and against everything our company stands for. We'd like to offer you the position of Director of Development Operations with a 20% salary increase and a seat on the executive leadership team." I was shocked. This was more than I had hoped for. "And what about the missing equipment?" I asked. "It's been recovered," one of the other board members said. "We've decided not to press charges against Vince as long as he returns everything and stays away from the company. We'd prefer to handle this discreetly to avoid negative publicity." I understood their position, even if it meant Vince wouldn't face legal consequences for his actions. At the end of the day, I had achieved what I wanted, clearing my name, seeing those responsible punished, and advancing my career. I accepted their offer and returned to work the following Monday. The atmosphere was noticeably different without Darren and Vince around. Many employees came up to congratulate me on my promotion, though most didn't know the full story of what had happened. Those who did, like Jake, Maria, and Priya, were just happy to see justice served. It's been 3 months since then, and things at Marshall Tech have improved dramatically. The board brought in a new CEO who actually understands our business and respects the employees. My team has expanded and we're working on some exciting new projects. The company culture is slowly returning to what it was before Darren took over. As for me, I learned some valuable lessons from this experience. Always document everything. Trust your instincts when something doesn't feel right. And most importantly, don't be afraid to stand up for yourself when you're being wronged. I could have just resigned when they first accused me of theft. It would have been the easier path. But by fighting back and finding the smoking gun, I not only cleared my name, but ended up in a better position than before. Sometimes the hard path is the right one. Looking back, I'm almost grateful for what happened. It exposed the corrupt leadership that was poisoning our company and gave me an opportunity to step up into a role where I can make a real difference. And knowing that Darren and Vince got exactly what they deserved, that's just the cherry on top. The next one is a malicious compliances story. Hopefully a good one for you. Sorry for any mistakes, as English is not my first language. A few details are changed for anonymity. I work at a niche retail store located in the heart of town. Our customers are dedicated and often travel from afar just to visit us, so having a clear and accessible parking lot is crucial for our business. Unfortunately, our next-door neighbors, a family-run landscaping and garden supply store, have been a thorn in our side for years when it comes to parking. The tension between my boss and the landscaping store owner goes back over a decade before I joined, all over something trivial. I know the landscaper once complained about a tree on our side of the lot, which was unsightly for their customers. It was the pettiest neighbor drama you could imagine, but it festered for years. The final straw came after the Rona, when the physical business in town started picking back up and our parking lot started overflowing with cars again, many belonging to the landscaping store's customers. See, our two parking lots are connected. Ours is about twice the size of his, but the landscaper had decided to reserve almost all his spots for his landscaping vans. Ironically, those vans are rarely even there during business hours. As a result, his customers just parked in our lot, leaving us with few spaces for our own customers. My boss, trying to be reasonable, approached the landscaper with a suggestion. Maybe they could adjust their parking setup to free up a few more spaces for customers, and that their vans were welcome to park in our lot if their lot was ever full. But the landscaper shot down the idea immediately, insisting that it was absolutely crucial to reserve all of those spaces for his vans, even though they were rarely there during the day. The conversation turned heated, ending with my boss threatening to put up a fence to separate the lots and enforce parking. The landscaper, practically daring him, shot back, "Go ahead," probably knowing how expensive that would be. As you can imagine, it ended with both men storming off and not speaking for 2 years. Typical neighbor stuff. Fast forward to recently, and we got a golden opportunity when a parking management company approached us with a proposal. They offered to install automated license plate cameras to enforce parking, allowing us to fine vehicles that stayed beyond a generous 3-hour free window if they hadn't paid. The setup would be free, we'd get most of the revenue, and they would keep any fines issued. It was perfect, especially since we were losing spaces to freeloaders. Wouldn't really impact the customers of the nearby stores, and if anyone had a good reason to park there for longer, then we could give them an extension at our discretion. However, for the cameras to work, they needed to cover both our entrance and the landscaping store's entrance. Being the considerate neighbor, again, my boss had the parking company rep reach out to the landscaper to explain the deal and benefits. But true to form, the landscaper didn't even let the rep finish before kicking him out, making it very clear that under no circumstances would his lot become a paid parking zone. Instead of going through the hassle of putting up the necessary expensive fence, my boss had a better idea: big rocks. One of his construction buddies had a stash of leftover rocks from a recent project and offered to place them for a great price. The parking company even agreed to front the cost, to be repaid through future parking revenue. On Monday morning, before opening hours, one of the buddy's employees, a big burly guy with arms like tree trunks, arrived with a truck and crane to place the rocks. The rocks were neatly spaced to allow pedestrians to pass with carts, but completely blocked vehicle access. The landscaper stormed out, yelling and trying to intimidate the worker into stopping. But the worker, unfazed, calmly told him to step back for his own safety, which made the much smaller landscaper back down and retreat in frustration. The rocks weren't just a physical barrier. They quickly became a mental obstacle for the landscaper's employees. Their muscle memory kept bringing them into our lot, only for them to realize too late that they couldn't drive through anymore. We watched from our newly installed surveillance cameras, just in case the neighbor tried anything, trying not to burst out laughing as their vans ended up awkwardly stuck. They'd have to reverse out and go all the way around to their own entrance, only to perform a series of painful maneuvers to squeeze into their now much smaller parking area. At one point, we even caught one of their rushing vans clipping a rock while trying to maneuver. A little bonus for our viewing pleasure. The next day, the parking company arrived to install the license plate cameras and set up the signage, which took a few hours. Throughout the installation, the landscaper's family members were prowling around our lot, snapping photos and videos as if they were on a mission to find a violation. But the parking company was very professional and had done everything by the book, so there was nothing for them to report. In the meantime, my boss was positively glowing with satisfaction as he helped direct the installation. Here's the best part. We noticed that the neighbor's family had started parking their personal vehicles in our lot, likely out of spite to mess with us. One day, my coworker saw one of the family members dash out of their store and sprint to their car. We thought it was odd at the time, but didn't think much of it until the following week when the landscaper's son came into our store looking a bit M.B.A. rassed. Apparently, he had accidentally overstayed the 3-hour limit and received a $150 fine. The son practically begged us to waive it, insisting it was just a simple mistake. My boss politely responded, "Oh, I'd really love to help, but it's out of our control now. The parking company handles all the fines." The look on his face was priceless. He left, shoulders slumped, retreating back to their store. Ever since, our lot has been blissfully clear and our customers have had no trouble finding spaces. Meanwhile, the landscapers have been grumbling as they have a harder time maneuvering their vans, still trying to pretend they're not bothered. As for my boss, he's been smiling a lot more lately. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting people get exactly what they asked for. Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already.